Hey guys, Aaron Dorr here with Georgia Gun Owners. We all know that last November we took back the House in Washington, D.C. and booted out Stacey Abrams again here in Georgia. But that's not stopping Joe Biden from unleashing on our gun rights with executive orders that are bypassing Congress. The thing is, though, Biden is counting on Georgia cops to do his work, for Georgia cops to enforce these tyrannical gun control edicts. I recently interviewed State Senator Colton Moore on his bill for GGO to implement the Second Amendment Preservation Act, which is designed to shut that attack down. Guys, you're going to love SAPA. Watch the interview, hit the links, join this fight today. Hey guys, Aaron Dorr here with Georgia Gun Owners. Session is officially underway. The fight for freedom is already kicking off in a major way here in Atlanta. And one of the main fights we're going to have this year is the Second Amendment Preservation Act. Join the day with State Senator Colton Moore from Dade County. Colton, thanks for your time and for being on the show today.
Hey, Aaron, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I think a lot of gun owners know that we accomplished a lot, both here in Georgia and federally in November. We took back the House. Yeah, it's a small margin, but the days of Biden just ramming gun control through that chamber are, we hope, over. And so he has to kind of reshuffle the deck on how Biden wants to move gun control. What we're seeing more and more is executive orders. These are totally tyrannical. There's never been a vote on them in the Congress, but he can simply, by fiat, say that an AR-15 pistol brace is illegal, or you can't transfer an 80% homemade, firearm. And we're seeing more of these come out. We're going to probably see more of them in 2023. You're pushing a bill in Atlanta, SAPA legislation, that is designed to stop that. And I want to make sure our members know what we're talking about. Just explain to us in a nutshell, what is SAPA? It's Second Amendment Preservation Act. How does it work, and why is it so important right now?
Well, I tell you what, we here in Georgia believe firmly in the Second Amendment, and we don't need the federal government to tell us what that means. The Second Amendment Preservation Act basically is going to allow citizens not to have to worry about a federal government coming in and being tyrannical and taking their guns. Now, you think, when I say allow, that should be common knowledge, right? The Second Amendment is supposed to protect us from an authoritarian power like the federal government. So with Joe Biden, as we know, in his executive orders, there is a high risk, a high potential that an executive order could potentially come in and, force things like red flag laws and other tyrannical gun legislation that's never actually been passed. So Second Amendment Preservation Act says local law enforcement, our state GBI, our state law enforcement, none of those guys have to participate. They can't participate with the feds and enforcing those crazy federal laws. And if they do, it's at their peril, because citizens then have the ability to sue them in a civil court. So there's some teeth in this legislation that absolutely prevents any of our local law enforcement from supporting the feds when it comes to enforcing those very unconstitutional gun laws.
I think the idea of SAPA is wonderful. Of course, that's why we're pushing this with you on behalf of our members, because it shouldn't be a revolutionary topic to say it, but it kind of is these days. The states are sovereign. Georgia has its own constitution, which protects gun rights. We have our own laws passed by the legislature, guys like you. We have our own cops funded by our own taxpayers to enforce our own damn laws. Right. And we don't want to see Georgia's police departments and Georgia's law enforcement community become a mere appendage of the DOJ. And so what's so great with your law here, your bill, is you're simply saying that, hey, we just simply want Georgia cops to enforce Georgia laws when it comes to firearms, ammo, and accessories.
It shouldn't
be a big deal.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to support law enforcement. We never want to put law enforcement in that type of situation. Confiscating guns, our local sheriffs, they all say, well, we would never do that. When the federal government comes in, that might be the case in my hometown. But you go to other places across the state, and that's not necessarily the case. So this type of legislation protects all Georgians, those who live in the big cities, those who live in the country with a rogue sheriff. So
Well, what's so cool about it is, back in the early days of Obama, 2009, 2010, the idea of nullification, bills was a hot topic in the gun rights community. And the problem with that was that it basically made federal gun control illegal in the states. And there are legal problems with that concept. And we're going to discuss this here in a moment. You're not doing that. You're simply saying, hey, you know what? If you want to do these tyrannical things and enforce this crap here in Georgia, you have your own officers do it. But Georgians aren't looking to see Georgia's police departments, sheriff's departments, and troopers be a part of this tyrannical gun grab, whether it's a pistol brace ban or a red flag law.
Right.
And so I think what we hear so often is, well, you can't do this. Well, it worked great when the shoe was on their foot. When we had a Republican president and, Trump, and he was saying we want to deport violent, illegal aliens. The blue states said, we're not going to help you do it. Now it's our turn using the exact same methodology to protect gun owners instead.
Right. And Aaron, this bill's already been passed. The same piece of legislation that I'm putting forth here in Georgia, it's already been passed in Missouri. It's already had legal challenges that it has won all along the way, and it will continue to win. We've got every right as a Georgia legislator to pass such legislation, and it's going to be great for all Georgians.
You bet. Now, you mentioned there's teeth in this, and I want to make sure we mention this is civil. And civil penalties are built into this legislation. I think the reason for it is worth repeating again, because we've got a dynamic now where mega population cities, Atlanta, we know what we're talking about, they've kind of got a bit of a God complex. And they kind of think that, we're going to do whatever we think is best. The heck with the General Assembly. And if there's a problem, we'll deal with that in court for the next 12 to 24 months. We can afford the legal fees to do that. We've seen that across the country over the last couple of years with lockdowns, all kinds of stuff where the cities are simply saying, you know what, we're big, we're powerful, we have a lot of money, and we're not going to obey laws from the legislature. And so your legislation kind of preempts that and says that if a department or a city orders the department, to enforce federal gun control laws, the impacted gun owner could take that agency into civil court. Now, I just love what you've done here, because we are hitting them now where it hurts, right in the department's pocketbook, not the individual cops, but their department. If they violate SAPA, they're on the hook for civil damages. I love that.
Right. No, and that's really the only way to incentivize them. If you try to do it any other way, if you try to, make it to where a law enforcement officer could be criminally charged, well, that's never going to go over in a legislature, and much less if it was to pass, it would never go over with the local departments, because how are you ever going to convince a DA to charge one of their local deputies for this?
Right.
It puts all the burden and all the hands into the general population for their ability to sue civilly in court, and that's where all the leverage is.
And what's nice about that is, going back to that discussion about nullification laws from back in 2009, 2010, the weak lining there was it required the AGs or the governors in the respective states to stand up on behalf of gun owners against the feds. We are bypassing all of that. We don't need the AG. We don't need Governor Kemp. I mean, not that he probably wouldn't do it, but the point here is that the power is given right into the hands of the people. And the people have the option now to haul these departments into civil court for damages. I want to ask some of the questions that we hear about the most. I'm sure you're going to hear about them already from your caucus or from the Democrats, certainly here in Atlanta. The big question is always, well, this has got to be unconstitutional. The Supremacy Clause says, for the most part, that federal law trumps state law. The federal Constitution more or less trumps the state Constitution. That's the common assumption behind the Supremacy Clause.
Yeah.
So aren't you violating the Supremacy Clause by passing or pushing for SAPA legislation?
No, absolutely not. If the feds want to pass some crazy gun legislation, it's going to be their burden to come to Georgia and enforce it. It's not the burden of our local sheriffs and our local state law enforcement to do their dirty deeds.
Exactly. And I just want to hit that again for all the lawyers who are watching this, the caucus lawyers, caucus staffers, anybody else. You're specifically not telling Joe Biden what he can and cannot do here in Georgia. You're simply saying that we're not going to help him. Going to help you. Yeah, we're not going to have our officers become your weapon against our own freaking citizens when it comes to enforcing gun control. And what's so beautiful about this then is this has survived so many court challenges at the federal level with the Supreme Court. Again, I have the list here in front of me, Colton. I'll just read it off. But for the folks who are curious about this, there is hundreds of years of Supreme Court precedent for the idea of the states having the authority to tell the feds to go pound sand. I mean, if there wasn't that protection already, then we would just dissolve our 50 states, dissolve our legislatures. You know, we could all become a vassal of the federal government. We don't have that system of government. So 2018 case, Murphy versus NCAA. 2012, the Obamacare case, NFIB versus Sebelius. 1997, New York State versus United States, 97's Brady Bill, and 1842's Fugitive Slave Act. All of these are cases where the states were ordered by the feds to do something. Maybe it was to ban sports betting. Maybe it was to bury nuclear waste in their soil, or it was gun control. In each of those cases, the state said, yeah, we're not doing that. That's not in the best interest of our citizens. And in every one of those cases, liberal and, right-leaning justices said, you cannot force the states to do that. So you don't just have good, gun rights doctrine here. You've got a lot of case law backing you up as well.
Right. No, I think this is going to be one of the most pure gun legislation pieces that we've seen in modern history in Georgia. And it's sad that we have to bring this type of legislation up. But hopefully this will concrete gun rights in Georgia for years to come, because, the federal government's going to be disincentivized if they have to come in here all by themselves and enforce those types of laws.
Those are bad optics too, man. If they even want to do it, man, those are bad optics. If you have a bunch of feds flying to Atlanta and go rolling around Georgia, knocking down doors to confiscate firearms, it's not going to go over too good in Dade County where you're from, or anywhere else, I don't think, in Georgia as well. So one of the questions we also hear, besides supremacy clause issues, is, well, this is obviously anti-cop, that you're trying to put cops in a bad spot. How do you answer that question?
I think it's the exact opposite. We're putting cops in a bad spot. I know my local sheriff's officers would tend to agree with me. We're putting them in a bad spot if the federal government's coming in and telling them they have to go rob their neighbors' weapons, right? I think it's one of the best ways to support law enforcement is to not put law enforcement in situations that ultimately aren't constitutional and are very dangerous to their own safety.
Well, I think what's so nice about this, just kind of hinging off of your point, is that I think of the 24-year-old, beat cop, the frontline officer or the deputy or the trooper fresh out of the academy. I know these people. I talk to them all the time. You do too, in the Capitol, all across the state. They love freedom. The vast majority of Georgia cops love the Second Amendment. They love freedom. And the last thing they want to do as a frontline officer is be forced to either A, violate their oath of office and their conscience and enforce federal gun control, and B, get fired. Because if we don't have SAPA in place as a shield, that's their options. And so I think when anybody says this is anti-cop, frontline cops love this because your bill protects them from those terrible two choices. Now they've got option C, which is, sorry, boss, can't help you. It violates the state's SAPA law.
Right. No, exactly.
One last question as well. You mentioned Missouri has this law on the books, and you're right, they absolutely do. They've survived 3 court challenges to date. And so part of this is kind of hinging off of what we've seen happen in Missouri. But what about getting assistance from local officers from the feds? We're not going to let the local cops help the feds enforce gun control. But if your county sheriff in Dade County has a homicide and he wants to have, ballistic analysis or fingerprint analysis or a database query, are we going to let them still have access to that kind of help with SAPA law, or how does that work?
No, absolutely. This law doesn't affect that in any way. So local law enforcement and federal law enforcement, if they're doing an investigation together, they have that right and that ability. This is the Second Amendment Preservation Act, which is to eliminate any responsibility from our local law enforcement from assisting the federal law enforcement in enforcing dirty gun laws.
That's right. Excellent. Yeah. Well, I love that. Which would be very clear for all the folks who are watching. We're not limiting the help the feds can give to the state and local. We're just simply saying we're not going to help you guys enforce federal gun control laws. And I think to go even beyond that further, what I love perhaps most about this from an implementation standpoint is just that we're even allowing for cooperation from state and local authorities in cases where there is a gun involved, if it's an underlying Georgia crime that's being committed that's against the law here in Georgia. So you have your atypical, drug mule with a straight truck full of fentanyl coming out of Florida, and he happens to have an AK in his vehicle, and the feds call GBI and say, we need help stopping, this criminal. Well, it's against the law to transport fentanyl here in Georgia as well. And right. So what your law or your bill is going to do is say, in those cases where there's an underlying felony drug crime or a felony persons crime being committed, we can still help the feds. The goal here is not to make it easy for criminals to do anything here in Georgia. On the contrary, you're simply saying, we just want Georgia cops to enforce Georgia laws when it comes to firearms, ammo, and accessories, because we have a deranged president right now who is looking to weaponize our own law enforcement community against Georgians. Your bill says not anymore.
That's right. Absolutely. Aaron, I appreciate you getting the word out to folks all across the state. Can't wait to see where this thing goes in the next couple weeks here in session.
So everybody here at GGO Nation, hit the link beneath this video, fire off your email. It's automatic. It goes right to your state senator, right to your state rep, and it says, hey, I want you to co-sponsor and vote for Senator Moore's SAPA legislation. It's a top priority for me as a gun owner here in Georgia. Guys, hit that link, take action.
Folks,
Colton, thank you very much.
Click the link. We've got to have that the grassroots support. These senators, I talk to them, they need to hear from you. So click that link.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Colton, for your time as well.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, take care.